I've got the Lord, and that's enough, that's enough, that's enough. Now there's always somebody laughing at me. Really, I don't mind. They always stop and try to block my progress most of the time. But the mean things they say, they don't make me feel bad. I give to the friend that I never had. I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord, and that's enough, that's enough, that's enough. Well, he raised me, and he saved me, oh, he saw me, and then he taught me. He's my keeper, he's my God, and I can feel him walking right by my side. I've got the Lord, 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 and that's enough, that's enough, that's enough.
Well, you've got Presbycast, and that's enough. However, I think if a sixth sola was to be discovered, it would be sola, whatever that song was, as the thing sort of required for one salvation. Welcome to Presbycast. I am, well, if you count my kind of user picture right here, it would imply that everyone on the show tonight is wearing a collared shirt, if you count cartoon images of former Simpsons writers. So, welcome back, everybody. We're all ready to, kind of banter back and forth. I feel like this is a show that's firmly in our pocket, as only our weird corner of the internet could really accomplish and pull off. And so I'll let Chortles kind of introduce what we're talking about, but we are joined by a recurring guest and a new guest, and we're always welcome. We're a very welcoming and inclusive bunch. We never want to turn anyone away if we can help it.
Yeah, we're the only true humanists, the real moderates, and I forget the third thing in that silly spiel of mine. Well, this is sort of a popular demand show because we figured out at some point that a lot of our listeners were big fans of our guest, and his name is Keith Foskey. He's a Baptist minister, and, I think in my mind I've been calling you Kevin some, so if I call you Kevin, I sometimes call Resby by my dog's name, which starts with the same consonant sound, so don't be offended if I call you Kevin, but it's Keith, and we bring people together. That's really why Presbycast started in the first place, and we brought our guest and our regular Third Banana, Stephen Spinnenweber, PCA pastor in Jacksonville. Keith, you happen to be in Jacksonville too. So you've got a new friend, the pastor who pastored Stephen's church before he got there. You knew him. You've hung out with actual Presbyterians. The caricature you present is based on some reality, I must say.
Indeed. I don't feel like it's so much of a caricature as just an amalgam of all the friends that I have.
Well, it looks like you have a Tootsie Roll there as a fake cigar. It would have to be a fake.
No, it's real. It was given to me when my son was born, and the man who gave it to me was one of my deacons. So I feel like I can say that even as a Baptist. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people younger than me don't know this, but it used to be in country Baptist churches that the men would smoke outside the church. Most of the deacons were smokers. Those days are gone.
Those were Marlboros, though.
Probably, yes. That's that would be my guess. But yeah, there wasn't much of that going. It was still, the last time I was a Baptist was in the 90s, and it was frowned upon, but there were a few that had to, they had to do it, and they did. Well, tell us about yourself. We know a little bit. You're a Baptist pastor of some kind. You must be a Calvinist because you talk about it all the time, and you've got it in your handle. And why are you? If you remember, you're not old enough either. The old Ross Perot. When Ross Perot's running mate Admiral Stockdale showed up on the debate stage, I guess versus Dan Quayle or somebody back in '92. he introduced himself this way. He said, "Who am I? Why am I here?" Which is what everybody wondered. So, who are you?
Well, my name is Keith Foskey. I'm the pastor of Sovereign Grace Family Church in Jacksonville, Florida. I've been the pastor there. This is my 16th year as a pastor. We're an elder-led church, so I serve with two other ordained ministers, Mike Collier and Andy Montoro. And we are a confessional Reformed Baptist church. We hold to the First London Baptist Confession, the second edition, which is the 1646 edition. First one came out in 1644, and then 2 years later, the 1646 came out. And we hold to that confession, and that's pretty much who we are. I guess I'm a graduate of Jacksonville Baptist Theological Seminary, which is a very small school here in Jacksonville, and I've been in Jacksonville my whole life.
There's been something of a Calvinistic Baptist tradition in the Panhandle. I don't know if that came down from Alabama or over from Mississippi or quite what the story is, but Pensacola has always had some Calvinistic activity, and there was a big conference down there in the 60s that was sort of influential in the founding of the PCA. It was sort of a rallying point for the conservatives in the old Southern Church. I forget exactly what that was called. My pastor was talking about that recently. But so how did you, we love to use the hip language. So you have to describe your authentically broken, beautiful wreck faith journey that brought you to being a Calvinist, because you weren't born that way, because we know Baptists aren't born anything.
Born depraved, my friend, born depraved. We are, the short story is I was saved in 99, and I'm in the same church that I grew up in, but it wasn't always a Reformed church. I've never been a member of another church. I pastor the same church I grew up in. But the church itself used to be part of the old Disciples of Christ. I mean, it was a very far left as far as the theology went. But the church left the Disciples of Christ the same year I got saved. And then a few years later, I felt God's call to ministry, and the church afforded me the money to go to seminary, and I went to school. And during my time in seminary, I was taught that Calvinism kills churches. That was what I was taught at seminary. It was a Southern Baptist seminary, and my professor said, if you go towards Calvinism, your church is going to die. And so they tried to talk us all out of it. Well, I was introduced to a pastor from Ormond Beach named Roy Hargrave, and Roy Hargrave was one of the men who were influential in exposing me to the doctrines of grace. Jim Dutton was a man that I knew that sort of introduced me to Roy, and through that began to study the doctrines of grace. Of course, when I was first introduced to it, I pushed back against it. I'd been taught in seminary it was wrong, but God showed me it was right. And in that same time, I was going through the process of ordination, and I was ordained, and I became the pastor again of the church I grew up in. And the church, the first 2 years of being the pastor of the church, I taught through the Gospel of Luke on Sunday morning. I was preaching Romans in Sunday school, teaching theology on Wednesday nights, and people began to pick up on words like election, predestination, things like that, because I had gone through my sort of Calvinistic conversion, but at that time the church hadn't, but they still were allowing me to preach. And so now God, through his grace, has brought our church through a time of revival. And when I say revival, I don't mean like a 1 week, tent meeting. We had a genuine several years of growth and change. And we went in 2011, we changed our name. We became Sovereign Grace Family Church. We used to be called Forest Christian Church Disciples of Christ. But in 2011, we changed our name to Sovereign Grace Family Church, and we've been a Reformed Baptist church ever since then. And so now that's 12 years ago.
Well, so the Disciples of Christ were sort of the liberal end of the Church of Christ.
Yes, sir. They're all part of the Restoration movement, the Stonite, Campbellite movement of the mid 1800s. Yes, sir.
Yeah, from Cane Ridge is where it all kicked off. I'm writing something now where I mentioned the Cumberland Presbyterians, they split off from the real Presbyterians at about the same time. And I don't remember the exact history. Were Stone and Campbell, were they originally Presbyterians, or were they something else? I don't recall.
I don't remember exactly. I know one of them, I think, came out of the Presbyterian Church, and I think one may have come out of the Baptist Church. There was also Walter Scott, who was involved in that as well. I always get mixed up with Willard Scott, and I start thinking about all the 100-year-old people whose birthdays on them. This is Willard Scott, and today we're celebrating your 100th birthday. No, yeah, it was Sir Walter Scott, Barton Stone, and Alexander and Thomas Campbell were the ones who began the Restoration movement.
Stephen, do you remember any historical specifics about Cane Ridge there? I know one of the founders of that movement was Presbyterian.
Finney?
No.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it just all that I remember is that it was like an ecclesial Woodstock. It was wild.
Yeah, they had vendors and everything. Yeah, vendors,
Oh, yeah.
Prostitutes on the borders of the. Of course, it was Kentucky, so it was probably they just wandered into them. But anyway, it was quite. You can trace many of the problems of, and I think Keith will agree with this, with evangelicalism and even the main line back to Cane Ridge, just not too far from Tennessee, middle of Tennessee. I think I should go up there sometime, but never have quite done that. Well, there aren't many churches that went from Disciples of Christ to Sovereign Grace Family Church, I'm guessing.
Yeah, our story's kind of unique. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So, are you affiliated with any networks, or do you identify? I mean, you're a congregational church. I've got to imagine you're independent and congregational. But do you have some sort of accountability or networks or group of churches that you really identify with?
Yeah, we are a part of the Fellowship of Independent Reformed Evangelicals. Firefellowship.org is the name of the group. Men like Brian Borgman, who is one of my favorite pastors, he's out in Minden, Nevada. He's a part of our group. A lot of the fire folks are out on the west side of the Mississippi, but there's a few of us on the East Coast, and I think I'm one of only 2 Florida churches that are part of that particular network. But we have conferences and things like that, and we meet, and most of us are Reformed Baptist. Many of them hold to the 1689. We, of course, hold to the 46, and so just a little distinction there.
Near where I used to work, there was a church called the Fire Baptized Holiness Church, and
yeah, we're not with that. We're not with them.
you might want to juice the name up a little bit, just an idea.
Gotcha.
So, we're big advocates for Presbyterianism, and one of the benefits and the inconveniences is accountability. Do you ever lament the lack of that? I mean, if I say, well, to whom are you accountable? And you would say, the congregation and my fellow elders and Jesus. But is there anyone between those, your congregation and the elders and Jesus?
Well, no. I would say we, as an independent church, we are the elders lead with the word, and we are responsible to the people, and the people do have the ability to call us to account and even to remove an elder if the congregation were to determine that were necessary. So in that sense, no, we would be an independent church. We don't have a larger governing body to whom we are responsible.
Is it true? I mean, it's been my impression over the years that some Baptist churches who become Calvinistic and have elders, sometimes the elders seem to have a lot more power than the congregation. To me, that's a little worrisome because they don't have anybody above them. And there are horror stories in every tradition. But do you know what I'm talking about there? I mean,
Sure.
There's some who kind of the cage stage elders.
I almost made a joke in the last video I did, which was the airline video. I don't know how many people saw that one. But I almost did a Reformed Baptist Airlines, and it was going to say that the pilot is in charge of everything, who gets to go to the bathroom, how many people get to, what people get to eat, and all that stuff. So I was going to joke and lament that, because a lot of the jokes that I make are actually laments about the problems in churches. I make jokes about the Methodists, not because I hate Methodists, but I'm lamenting the fact that in many Methodist churches we find liberalism and problems like that. So there is, I do believe, there have been some issues with elders who have misused their authority and have lorded over God's people. And our elders are very aware that that is a real temptation and a problem that can happen, and so we have of course prayed and asked God to keep us from that. And of course, I don't want to get too much into the potentialities of what all can happen, but we've seen it happen, and at least that's been a warning for us about what we want to avoid.
Stephen, any questions for our Baptist brother from who sort of operates in a different paradigm than we do?
So, Keith, people in your congregation, what kind of preachers, other than their pastor, what kind of folks would your folks gravitate to or have an affinity with? John MacArthur? I know that there's probably a larger spectrum of Baptists in the U.S. than there is Presbyterians. So, who would you say you all have some parallels with, for those that aren't familiar with your present affiliation?
Okay. I'm not sure. I think I kind of hear two questions, so let me clarify. Are you asking what pastors my people like to listen to, or what ones would? Okay. Because it sounded almost like you were saying what pastors would we be like, and that, I think that's two different questions. The first one, though, the people that our people I think listen to the most would be men like Vodi Bakum, men like Tom Askell. Men like James White is a man I know personally. We've had him at our church, so he would be one that is that I have pointed people to, and we of course encourage people to read his books and things like that. So I would say MacArthur is less. Even though a lot of our people love MacArthur, I would say he's probably not as popular because of his dispensationalism. We're not dispensational. We would take some differences, especially eschatologically, from him. And so yeah, even though a lot of we do love him, and I would say very few people have made the mark that he has in the on the evangelical stage that MacArthur has. But at the same time, I would say. Those are the ones that I hear our people talk about the most.
So you mentioned James White. Have you talked to him about the clothing?
Which one?
James White, the clothes that he wears. Have you talked to him about that?
Oh, no. Are we not a fan of the Coogis? Are we not a fan of the?
Look, I'm convinced what he did was that he raided the set of the original Santa Claus when Neil had all those sweaters. You know what I'm talking about, like the Tim Allen version?
Yes,
those
I do.
Are
that
Neil's
is Judge
sweaters.
That's Judge Reinhold.
Arguably his finest role, other than Fast Times, I would say. We rewatched that over, December. It happened.
You don't think Beverly Hills Cop would rate?
Oh, it's nothing against Beverly Hills Cop, but he's just so like.
Neil, yeah.
He's like Neil is exactly what he is. And
I think Neil is the guy from the Seinfeld episode, The Close Talker. Yeah. I think that, yeah.
So let me ask you. Let me ask you about. Of course, we would bristle at the term Reformed Baptist. We would be happy to call you particular Baptist or Calvinistic Baptist.
And can I mention something? I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's why I go by Calvinist. I typically try to, when people say, well, are you Reformed? I say we are Baptist and we're Calvinistic. But when I said earlier that we're Reformed Baptist, I know that there are disagreements about how people use the word Reformed. So I usually say if you want to call us Reformed, I say little r Reformed, in the sense of.
So my question is, in the whole Calvinistic Baptist, Sovereign Grace Baptist, the Calvinistic Southern Baptist, and I know not everyone holds to the First or Second London. Some of them it's New Hampshire, or they use the Abstract of Principles, the Southern Seminary, which I think is actually pretty good. I actually sort of had it when I was a Baptist. I sort of admired that. Of course, I knew about Boyce and Dagg and all those people, so I've been there. But how many? It's my impression that just because there's so many Baptists. I don't know, most listeners don't know that in the 80s, the guys who would become the founders, Southern Baptists, they first got together and met, really got rolling in the kind of early mid-90s. And they've really grown to numbers that I would never have imagined in the Southern Baptist Convention, just to be honest. I'm sort of shocked. Al Mohler would have been in that camp more at one time, seems to have maybe backed off from public association with some of that. But how many Calvinistic Baptists are there? People who say, I'm a Baptist, but I'm Calvinistic, or I call myself Reformed. How many are there out there? I think there's more than there are in all of NAPARC, which is, about, 600,000 spend, something like that. But I wonder how many there are in this country.
More than will admit it. I would say there's more than there are that will admit it. And the reason why I say that is because I think a lot of men would hold to a Calvinistic soteriological position, but they are less inclined to make it known because the Calvinism, the name Calvinism has such a negative reputation within Southern Baptist life for some people. In fact, I have been told by friends who are pastors, I invite them to come on my show, and they say, I can't come on your show. It's called Conversations with a Calvinist. We can't be associated with Calvinists.
Well, you know what Calvin called people like that, don't you?
No, but
I don't know how you pronounce it, but Nicodemites is what he called them.
okay.
Yeah. People who kept to use an old term, a condition of low visibility. Yeah.
Well,
so I left. I guess I sort of made a mistake because I left the Baptist world in 2003. And that was about the time it was really kicking off. And the numbers, of course, I probably would have left anyway, just because I didn't, it was cool. It was cool before it was, everybody was doing it. And then I had to move on. Maybe that was it.
Yeah.
So how many, like your brand of whatever that is? It seems to me that Reformed or Calvinistic Baptists sort of have a marketing problem. Because it's hard to point at, I'm Southern Baptist, but I'm Calvinistic. I'm Southern Baptist, but I'm a Founders Church. And I really thought the Founders guys might be on the verge of pulling out a year or two ago, and that didn't happen. But I think Spinnenweber will back me up on this. For all the diversity we have in the PCA, and for the problems that we have, we're still one thing. We sort of know where the boundaries are, and we're actually, we're connected. True, when we had the General Assembly last summer, we had 2,300 elders there. About between a quarter and a third were ruling elders, lay elders, you might say, and then teaching elders. But there's, we sort of know what we are, even though we're not very good at being what we are. How many do you feel the lack of connectionalism ever?
Yeah, I think groups like Founders helps, because if you're a Founders friendly church, you at least have identified in some way of having a Calvinistic soteriology. And so for many, many years, that was how we sort of identified ourselves online, was we were a Founders friendly church. They have a website where people can go and search. And so if you're a Southern Baptist church and you're Calvinistic in your teaching, as far as your soteriological teaching, that would be one way of identifying and being a part of if you will, a identification marker. if you see a church that says Founders Friendly, typically that's a Calvinistic Baptist church. Outside of that, I can't give you the numbers in the convention. Like I said, I think there's more than will admit it, but let's see. Well, there's Founders, and then there's now G3 is starting a network of churches, and that's a new thing that is relatively the new kid on the block. And used to there was and I hope I don't say something wrong here, but used to the Acts 29 network was a network that people would sometimes associate with more Calvinistic leaning teachers. So, but then again, you got guys like Driscoll and other guys who kind of made that the young, restless, and reformed took off and did a lot of things that weren't really helpful.
Resby, this is your cue. He said Acts 29.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I mean,
Resby was there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it was sort of 2011, 2012 through like the 20. I don't know, probably about like midway through 2013. So I wasn't like, it didn't have like a long stint, but it was sort of, I got out just in time. It was like like someone who pulled their Bitcoin, the day before the FTX collapse. You're just sort of like, man, like that ended up working out all right. I dodged a bullet there.
Would you agree though that those guys sort of identified in the Calvinistic sphere?
Oh yeah, I don't think I've never met, and I still have some, very, very good friends who remain Acts 29 ministers, either abroad or around, and they're all great men. Like one was in my wedding, but at least up from the top and kind of like the name branders, as you were all. At least at one time described themselves as Calvinistic, but I think it's become very clear that since then they were sort of using that because they saw it as the quickest way to the top of the pedestal they wanted to be speaking from.
Yeah, I remember back in I think it was early 2000s, Time Magazine had a religious trends to watch, and one of the trends was New Calvinism. I have a copy of that on my computer somewhere, the picture of that article. And, I think a lot of those guys were a part of that, the new, quote unquote, New Calvinism.
Well, I remember I was in London in 2008, and Spinnenweber won't believe this. I don't think he's heard me say it before. The Free Church of Scotland, I went to their congregation in London. That's an old confessional, conservative, at that time still were just a psalm singing denomination. Their monthly magazine had Mark Driscoll on the cover, and they interviewed Mark Driscoll, Resby, complete with the shark tooth necklace. You remember that? You remember that look? And
it's coming. I mean, like we're close enough. Like the '90s are coming back. Like we're gonna see some. We're gonna see some shark tooth necklace, maybe some puka shells.
I'm wearing puka shell under my seersucker right now.
I was unironically going to make the prediction we see puka shells at GA this year. I mean,
I've been waiting. This is my moment. I have been waiting for this. 2023 is going to be our year.
Well, your year.
So it was awkward being an American in a Free Church congregation, and there was Mark Driscoll on the cover of their magazine. And the pastor of that congregation, he had nothing to do with that magazine, is now the pastor of First Pres Jackson, where Ligon Duncan previously was. So he moved up, although he kind of did a lateral move to a very unglamorous part of Mississippi before he took the great chair there in Jackson.
But they do have Taco Bells, though he is not a frequenter of said fine dining establishment.
Yeah,
based on your episode with David.
Oh, he'll tell you that. Yes, we discussed that down in we had another time too in person. Not a fan, is he? So Well, so the reason we got you on here is that you make these videos, and some people think they're funny. But it
I like how you
occurred to
said
me.
some people do.
So
You could have totally turned this episode heel and be like, some people think they're funny. That's not why we had you on.
Methodists are not some people. I've seen the comment section.
Yeah. They are not happy.
at some
Methodists
point,
are like Bay Area sports fans. They're very thin-skinned.
well, I've got 5 videos queued up, and with our highly advanced streaming technology, we can show them easily. Our listeners and viewers know that we do this. But it occurred to me at some point that you have subtitles on there, and you know who's speaking in them, by their denomination by the subtitle. So the podcast listeners, let me apologize to you. I may try to break in and say Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian to try to help you follow. It still may be funny, even if you don't know who Keith is sort of impersonating or mimicking or caricaturing, however you want to say it. But it occurred to me that Methodist, as we look at these, is sort of a stand-in for mainline. Is that not so?
Oh yeah. And I've had some good, more down to earth Methodists who've thought that that I've been a little unfair to them. But you're right. It's caricaturing a larger. You could put Episcopalian there. You could put the PCUSA in.
Oh, please, yes.
Yeah, I mean any one of those would fit when I'm wearing that pink shirt, and that's how you know, is because it's the outfits. Because the pink polo is the mainline guy. Yeah.
Well, you would really, if you really want to typify the PCUSA pastor, you would have to cross-dress and go by Megan or Caitlin, because nearly every PCUSA pastrix is named Megan or Caitlin. And tonight at the prison, so the reason that people are disturbed that I'm not wearing my normal T-shirt, this is my prison exhorting shirt, apparently. And we ran into, we're going into the prison, and you get backed up at these gates, kind of checkpoints, because it's like a half-mile walk to where we have to do our thing. And this guy kind of catches up to us, and he's wearing a clerical collar. And I think, okay, I've seen this guy before. He must be Roman Catholic. But he spoke to us, and he was Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, which are, is the conservative Lutherans. Delightful guy. We talked to him all the way in until we broke it. We split to our respective rooms, chapels. And then on the way out, we were, again, we synced up. We talked to him all the way out. And somehow PCUSA came up, and I said something about, well, it's Pastor Megan or Caitlin. He said, well, the one I'm thinking, in this little county where his church is. He said, there is a PCUSA church in our county. I said, well, it's probably Pastor Megan or Caitlin. He said, well, it is a woman. I don't know if that's her name, but yes. These little country PCUSA churches, they meet once or twice a month with, a handful of octogenarians typically, and not going to be around long, I fear. But yeah, so if you want to be PCUSA, you need to present as a woman, or maybe something non-binary would be a little better. And that might really get you in trouble.
It might be hard to do with this beard. I might get my wife involved.
Well, Brad,
Well,
it's funny that you. Well, it's funny you mentioned the LCMS, because you also, at another point, interviewed a Lutheran funny guy in Hans Feeney. So, Keith, the way I kind of see your videos, and we're going to look at them, is you kind of have that same twinkle in the eye, the subtle jab. And I think anybody with skin that's thicker than paper could take those in good faith and, goodwill, and say, you know what, there's a kernel of truth to this, laugh it off, which is, I think, sort of how Brad and Resby have really, this is what they've been doing from the beginning, is they've got us laughing. And I think that's kind of a lost virtue, maybe in Presbyterian circles. That, I mean, Brad, maybe
we've
you
had
would know this
Baptist
better
funny
than me.
men, we've had Lutheran funny men. The only people we haven't had on are Presbyterian funny men.
Well,
Are there Presbyterian funny men? I mean, I'm asking, like, historically, is there anybody that we knew that had sort of a witty way about them? Brad, you'd know that.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, we're going to talk about that after we watch some of these videos. We're going to talk with Keith about humor, whether it has any value, whether it's unrighteous, whether coarse jesting, something to be avoided. God laughs. He usually laughs at. It's usually bad when he laughs, but he does. I think God has a sense of humor, and I'll have an example or two of that as we talk. But I'll bet Keith's thought about it a little bit because he's a biblical guy and he's doing humor, so he's thought about it, even if he hasn't systematically put his thoughts down. So we'll find out about that. But let's go ahead and watch. I guess it's one of your more recent videos. I think the volume will come in about right. I'm going to leave everybody's mic up, so if you want to jump in, cackle, whatever, I may try, at least on this first one, for the benefit of the audio-only listener, to let them know, well, who is on screen. So let's just start I think this is the airlines video, Keith, and this is a good way to just to move us on. So here we go.
Well, hold on. If it's the airline video, then I actually announce each time who it is, because it starts with
that's good.
Starts with IFB, which is the Independent Fundamentalist Baptist.
We know about those.
Then it goes to Presbyterian, and
we had Nathan Rager on the show before he got in trouble. Yeah, so that was edgy. So all right, well, we're going to play this now. One criticism I'm going to have of you, and I think you're going to remedy this. You don't include Calvinistic Reformed Baptist in your videos.
I have a reason for that, and I can tell you now, or I can hold off. But I do have a reason.
You can tell us after we watch this first one.
Let's do it.
That's what we'll do. Here we go.
FB Airlines. We want to begin by talking about the rules, because rules are very important to us. Our first rule is that there's going to be no drinking, no smoking, no tattoos, and no movies on this flight. For the safety of all of our unsafe passengers, we want to let you know that our co-pilot is lost. That way, in the event of a rapture, you'll be able to make it to the ground safely. If you look in the back of the seat in front of you, you'll notice there is not a safety card. Instead, what we have is a chick track. It's called Flight Saver, and it's all about people who die in a fiery plane crash and go to hell. We hope you have a nice flight. Our flight attendants will be by just in a few minutes to say the sinner's prayer with anybody who needs. Welcome to Presbyterian Airlines, where superior theology meets superior air travel. We want to let everyone know that all of the sections on this airplane are all smoking, so get out your cigars and pipes, and our flight attendants will be around with the whiskey cart as soon as we reach cruising altitude. Our in-flight movie today is a series of theological lectures from the late Dr. R.C. Sproul. We're asking that all non-Presbyterians be prepared to be confronted about all of your theological deficiencies. I would introduce our pilot to you, but we don't have a single pilot. We have a session of pilots who all share authority in the cockpit. Welcome to Big Eva Air, where we try to make plane travel as exciting as it can be. We're going to begin our flight today with a 1-hour musical performance from our live in-flight band, which is going to be followed by our flight attendants, who are going to come in and shoehorn a watered-down gospel message into songs from the hit musical Hamilton. We want to also tell you about our special airplanes. We don't have pilots in each of our planes. We have one single pilot who pilots all the other planes from a central location, which we call the main hangar. We want to thank you for flying with Big Eva, and remember, if you love Jesus, you're going to fly Big Eva Air. Welcome to United Methodist Airlines, where we affirm everyone. If you have any questions for me, just remember that my pronouns are he and him. This is the point in the briefing where we used to point out that the majority of our pilots are women. However, in our last meeting, we decided that we can't determine what that means anymore, so we're going to go ahead and skip it. You'll be glad to know that all of our planes are now equipped with safe spaces, so if anyone does anything or says anything to offend you, you have a place where you can go and cry. We're so glad that you've chosen to fly with Pentecostal Air Travel. We want to let you know that prior to the flight, one of our prophets went by and prayed over every seat. Now, they won't be flying with us because they have their own private jet. We also want to let you know that later we're going to be sending around an offering plate. Now, we know that you paid for your ticket, but your payment for your ticket is what you owe. What you give in the offering plate is what you sow. Also, keep in mind that in the event that the cabin should lose pressure, a compartment above your head will open and an oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Do not grab that oxygen mask. That would be an absolute lack of faith on your part. Instead, begin to pray and rebuke the demon of decompression.
Well, that was. I think that may be your most well developed one, because there were some real subtleties there. You hit on the multi-site Big Eva Church. It's almost like you've been reading our timeline for the past 8 or 9 years. We even have multi-site PCA churches. I'm sorry to confusingly I say that very confusedly, but it's a fact.
The main hanger is fantastic. Like, that is a great line.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I think, of course, it's very helpful to play this one because you identify each person. I notice in our live our live chats, the ladies, and we have quite a few female listeners. They especially like that, and I think it's because it's men that you're raking over the coals here, since you typify all these traditions. But maybe I'm just being suspicious as to why they enjoy this quite as much as they do.
Yeah. And one thing you'll notice is each of these guys is actually a character. This is my 8th or 9th video that I've produced with the denominations, and I've developed characters. And so if you listen to the Presbyterian, he says superior air travel meets superior theology. Well, that's because I developed within the group. The Presbyterian sits back and looks at everybody else with disdain because he sees himself as having superior theology, and that's that's become a hashtag on Twitter. People hashtag, and people will tag me and say, "Hey, superior theology," So that's sort of a new thing that was unintentional, but it was awesome.
Well, we do believe it's superior, but we don't deserve it. We didn't earn it, but yeah. No, I think that's probably your most nuanced and thoughtful of all of them. Good, but you would expect development. This is your most recent one, so we expect great things.
I created logos for each of them. I don't know if you noticed that, but each one of them had its own logo. I used a logo program and created the Methodist one is the one I'm most proud of, because all of the planes are flying backwards and down, and they all make a rainbow. So
and the like mainline attendance figures. Of course, exactly. we have to mention that the United Methodists are splitting, and I don't know if that's ultimately good for some of us, because I have this theory that the Gospel Coalition and Christianity Today, the whole Big Eva thing, I don't think they can neglect that market. And the fact that, just like with when the EPC, I don't know if you know about this, but the EPC and the ECO, they came out of PCUSA churches, and they were more conservative, especially on sexual issues, but they kept their female officers, and in some cases pastors. And the same thing's going to happen with the Methodists. So I think we're in a fight in the PCA, maybe not in any other NAPARC denominations, but I think we're in a fight on male only officers, and I don't think some for good motives for receiving these poor benighted Methodists, and they really are pretty benighted, because I think your average Southern Baptist standard garden variety has more and better theology than the conservative United Methodists do. I just don't know what they believe. In fact, I'm going to do an object lesson. I had to pull out my old Bible today to prepare. It's an old New American Standard to prepare for the last minute prison exhortation, and I attended a United Methodist Church in the late '80s for a while. And I went to their new members class. I don't know if any of y'all can see that, but it says UMC, and here are the distinctives. Let me read them off for this pastor who was leading class. Pluralism, tolerance, primacy of grace as God's chief characteristic, that he's gracious, sanctification, but also balance. So when pluralism and tolerance as number 1 and 2 in the 80s, no surprise that they got to where they got, So it's really, amazing. So we'll see what the infusion, whether the United Methodists are lovingly embraced in the Big Eva fold. I mean, those who, what do they call themselves? The General Motors Methodist or something like that. GMC is their new moniker, something like that. Anyway, we hope pray for the best for them, but I don't know. I think they waited a little long to get out, and I'll bet you think that too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, the way the screen is laying out here, I can't see the names of the videos, but let's go ahead and see another one. People enjoyed that a great deal, and let's see another.
We're all coming to the interdenominational barbecue. I'm glad you're all here, and I hope you all brought those 9x13 casserole dishes I put in the invitation. Those were a requirement.
Okay, so this is the interdenominational barbecue. That first little snippet there, it refers to the Baptist penchant for very detailed announcements and organization on some of these after church events. But let me inject a story. Everybody knows I like to go on. We once had a guy at my last Southern Baptist church, and he was announcing that the church ladies were collecting supplies for the prison, the very prison that I spoke at tonight. And he was reading the announcement, and he said, and one of the things that the prisoners needed was most towelettes. He meant moist. Okay, I'll never forget it as long as I live. So let's finish this video with that mental image in your mind.
Those were a requirement. Not me. I decided to bring a gluten-free, vegan, non-GMO, kale-based side dish, which is better for our bodies and for the environment. I really want to thank you for the invitation. I don't remember inviting you, but that's cool. I'm glad you're here. Well, actually, the Methodists invited me. They welcome everybody. Yes, we do. Okay, so what did you bring? Well, I only eat foods that are keeping with the dietary restrictions of the Mosaic Law. Eating pork or shrimp is just unacceptable to anyone seeking to please God, so I brought a fruit tray. That sounds good. You can put it right next to the shrimp cocktail and the lobster bites that I brought. What else we got? Guys, I didn't bring food, but I did bring fireworks. After we eat, we can send these suckers up, and they say, God bless the USA. But it's not the 4th of July. Hey, man, when you love Jesus, every day's the 4th of July. Also, I brought dessert.
Scotch. Okay. So that was the Presbyterian at the end, of course. So I don't think we're offended by this. Where did you borrow that bottle from, is what I want to know.
I will tell you that bottle belongs to me, and it was given to me by a church member when I moved into my new house. So I hope that doesn't offend any of my Baptist brethren, but I do own that bottle. That is,
it's full.
Well, almost.
Mostly.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't really have much of a taste for it, but yeah, I do own it.
People get colds. You know, some of my colonial ancestors in Virginia. There are records that show that they were, of course, Virginia had an established Anglican Church of England. You had to go. And there are records showing that some of my ancestors were fined. I don't know if they were put in stocks, but they were fined for not attending the established church. And they were also fined for attending under the influence of alcohol. And I told my first PCA pastor that, and he said, well, maybe they had back trouble. So if you ever have back trouble, we're going to forgive you for drinking whatever that is there. It doesn't look like it's very good stuff, but we wouldn't expect a Baptist church member to know his way around total wine, the way a man should.
Sure.
So any thoughts on the characters in this video? There was a Seventh-day Adventist in there, which is kind of weird. We have a few of those around here.
I'm pleading the fifth on the Seventh-day Adventists because we are currently, during our church renovation, renting space from them.
Good call.
So and I will say, sort of 1 Corinthians 10 not being a stumbling block, we at our church have a mixed tray, but during our period of worshiping in the SDA church, we are Welsh's only. So this is maybe as close as we'll get to Methodists.
Yeah,
because,
which is to say Methodist. I'm sure Keith knows that Brother Welch was a Methodist elder, layman. Yeah.
And Keith, I really do have to commend whoever your minister of audio visual is at your church is doing a real bang-up job. I think if you were to reward him with some extra Bitcoin, that he would really appreciate it. Top-notch production quality, sir.
Oh, well, thank you.
All right. Well, let's just see another one. The live viewers really enjoy this. Some of them have probably seen them a dozen times. This is probably not humor exactly the way Presbycast has done it, but it's funny anyway. Here we go.
For coming to our interdenominational meeting, and I just want to begin by saying I think it's very important that we no longer allow secondary issues to separate us. Absolutely. Our mutual love of Jesus should definitely help me overcome all of your deficient understanding of the scriptures.
He has a beer bottle.
Hey, is that a beer? Don't start with me. Bro, one of my church members prophesied over me Sunday. He said this was going to be the year of unity. So I knew you were going to. So, what's going on in everybody's churches? Dude, check it out. Our church just installed a 60-foot water slide baptismal. They go down at 55 miles an hour and bam! And for the kids, we put in a fire truck baptistry. That way, when they get baptized, sirens go off. It's woo! Man, it's a party. What ages are those baptisms? Bro, we got them as young as 3 years old in the baptistry. You realize if you keep baptizing those young ages, you're going to have to apologize to the Presbyterian, right? Who could that be? Hey, guys, can I come in?
Oh, it's a Mormon. That's good. He slammed on the Mormon. So I got to ask you, Keith, so your Big Eva character there with his baptismal water slide, as a real Baptist, I got to think that the Big Eva mega church, that, you know, it was Southern Baptist, and then they figured out they'd rather be just a generic Baptistic church, and they have baptismal Sundays where they have a bunch of cattle troughs, and everybody has a T-shirt, and, you know, people's mother and sister or female Sunday school teacher baptize them. And when you go under and you come up, you have to go, you know, you have to do a fist pump, and they put you on camera while the very elaborate Coldplay cover band is playing at high volume. They have a big screen, more than one, and they show the inspirational images of this this triumphant, raucous, disorderly baptism service in agricultural equipment. So what are your thoughts on that? I'll bet I can guess.
First of all, the fact that you described it as raucous in agricultural equipment, that will make its way into that will make its way into a video. The term agricultural equipment makes me happy. That pleases me. So anyway, no, I obviously I think a lot of that is a little out there. I always joke because people say, well, you never make fun of the Baptist. I say, well, first of all, the Baptist, I try to make the Baptist character the neutral man, because there always has to be somebody who's asking questions. The neutral man is the Baptist. But the real Baptist, the real SBC Baptist is Big Eva. That's the real Baptist. But they don't call themselves Baptists anymore because they want to be known as the hip non-denominational. So it's called Big Eva / non-denom, but they're the real Baptists.
Well, you know, you can say that, and if I said that, I'd probably get in trouble. And I don't know, in East Tennessee, there's still some standard old Baptist churches that would be very much like what I remember. There's a non-crazy IFB church. I guess they're sort of that near, a couple of blocks from where I live. I walk the dog around their parking lot all the time, and I think they're pretty solid and not crazy. But, we've got a mega church in my area that started as Southern Baptist, and they're not anymore. And, yeah. So it must be hard.
Brad,
I mean, to be a traditionalist Southern Baptist must be pretty difficult right now.
Sure. I did want to make one more mention about the video, if you don't mind. This was the very first interdenominational video that I made. I made it. My wife and I were joking one day. We said, what would it look like if all of the denominations sat in a room and talked about how they did church? That was what got that started. And so we wrote my wife helps me write these little scripts. We wrote a script because I have to film each part individually. So you have to have a script before you start. I film each part individually, and then we put it together, and I posted it. Well, it went to like several thousand views, and it was interesting. Well, a friend of mine at church had a TikTok account. He said, well, I'm going to start TikTok for you. He put it on TikTok, and it went over 100,000 views in one day.
Wow.
And so that's what got this started. That video that you just showed was the first video. And since then, we've gone over I think we're over 2 million views on TikTok now. Not on that video, but on the series has hit over 2 million views. So it's connecting with some people on some level.
Redeeming the platform. That's what you're doing. You are a Kyperian. I don't know if you knew that, but and just so in all seriousness, though, I want to circle back to this because I think Brad, in terms of the use of agricultural equipment in a tacky fashion, I'd be curious. We got more videos, but regulative principle of worship. How operative is that in the Calvinistic Baptist circles in which you run? Because Baptists, I mean, we have a spectrum in the Presbyterian Church in America. I actually just
hold on.
had a.
You said spectrum. Leave the OPC out of this, please.
Look here, sir. I had an OPC couple in my home tonight, and they were fantastic. But even as they were kind of on the outside looking in, saying, no two PCA churches, it feels like, are alike because we don't have, I would say, worship homogeny. So we can talk about this later because that's more on a serious topic, but regulative principle and, the excesses of broader evangelicalism, how do your churches look, and how strictly would you say adhere to the RPW?
Yeah, and how do you decide what to do in a worship service?
We would hold to the RPW in the sense of we do believe that our commands for worship come from Scripture, and that Scripture regulates worship. And we are we do have I would say that our church is not liturgical in the sense of strictly liturgical, but we do have an order of worship that we follow, and it's basically the same order every week. We begin with a call to worship, a prayer of invocation, and then we sing a song, and then we have a time of we do have a time where people will turn and welcome one another, extend a hand of fellowship, and then we sing a second song, and then we have our time of offering where the people actually get up and take their offering to the plate. We don't pass plates. We actually get up and come to the plate and distribute the offerings that way. And then we have a third song which is played during that. We play a song as we're giving. We sing as we're walking forward. And then we move into a time of scripture reading, which is we do an entire chapter of scripture reading a week. Right now we're reading through the minor prophets. And then we have our pastoral prayer, which is an intercessory pastoral prayer. And me and the two other elders rotate through that prayer. And then the sermon, I usually preach for about 50 minutes. That's my typical 45 to 55 minute sermon. And then we will have a final song. Well, I'm sorry. Then we have we do the Lord's Supper every week. So
Wow.
we have our service lasts almost 2 hours. I'd say about an hour 30, hour 40, and we do have the Lord's Supper every week. So that's how we don't do an invitation. We don't play Just As I Am and have people come forward. We tell people to respond to the word. We respond to the word by receiving of the sacrament of the Lord's table.
When do you play Oceans?
You call it a sacrament too.
Well, we're not allergic to that word. Sometimes I use ordinance, sometimes I use sacrament, but I know that there are some who are a little more allergic to that because they feel like it ties some in some way. Some people feel like it ties to Rome. So I figured I could use it here and be okay. Yeah. So you guys understand
this is
what
a
we
safe
mean.
place.
Yeah, exactly. This is a safe space.
place.
I feel very safe. Yeah.
You should.
Let me, I think one of the things being lost in the Big Eva style Southern Baptist churches, and I base this on just a small sample size, but any form of prayer that's more than cursory in a service Now, I'll say this: one of the SBC churches, I guess one of only 3 I've ever been a member of. But growing up, maybe middle school years, there were dimmers on the lights in the worship hall, and it was a deacon's job to, in the pretty standard length, 7, 8, 9, 11-minute pastoral prayer, they would slowly dim the lights. And I don't know if they tried to put everybody asleep before the sermon. That was the effect of it. But it was supposed to be more spiritual if you slowly dimmed the incandescent lights during the pastoral prayer. So, Spin, would you be in favor of a light dimming deacon for your pastoral prayer, or no?
We actually outsourced that to our diaconess board, and it's going quite well.
Well,
Nice.
and probably some cute rope lights and little faux lanterns and things. I did come across a website of a PCA church this week, and I posted it privately. I didn't want to embarrass anyone, but I said, this looks like, I think the name of this look is White Girl Wedding Chapel, because it was just it was just amazing. It looked like, I don't know, stunning.
That's funny.
So that's a long service. Some we do. I don't know about Spinning Weber. We do monthly communion, and that service can be about an hour and a half. But our sermons are typically in the 30, the 20. I mean, they can run anywhere from 25 to 45 minutes. But we don't do the homilies. We don't do the 15 or 20 minute sermons at any rate.
Yeah.
And we have a very thorough words of institution, fencing of the table, as our book of church order actually requires, but not everyone follows it. But our ministers are pretty thorough.
I have a question for you, because we fence the table as well, but I think we probably would have maybe a slight difference on this, because we would fence the table for believers only, but not members only. We say if you're a member of another church in good standing with that church and you are visiting with us, that you are welcome to participate in the Lord's table. But if you are under any form of discipline, or if you are outside of a local church and you're not a member of a local church, then we would ask you not to participate.
That's almost exactly what we do. Member in good standing of a Bible-believing or evangelical church, or we may say church of like faith and practice, but that doesn't mean Presbyterian, actually.
Yeah.
So we're actually, as Stephen knows, we're sort of we're required to use those words, and not all churches do it carefully. I mean, I've been in PCA churches where I chose not to participate because I didn't think the table had been fenced adequately. Because it's very, and I'll tell you this: this is oh gosh, this is like Baptist psychotherapy for me. Regression. I think one of the last straws that, well, no, it wasn't, because we had another pastor after that, but we had a guy, and I promise you I'm telling the truth. This guy came into the Southern Baptist Church, and he had a little bit of John Piper and a little bit of Neil Anderson. I mean, the whole spiritual warfare, generational curses. I mean, he was just a little bit of everything right around the year 2000. Which was a weird time anyway. And he preached his sermon, his trial sermon. You do one trial sermon. And I turned to someone and I said, he'll split the church or be gone in 6 months. And he lasted 7. So I was wrong, technically. But, and he also had this little IFB thing, because he sort of started this bus ministry. And he was bringing in kids who we'd never seen their parents, and they never made a profession of faith. And he served the Lord's Supper to those kids, which as a Baptist, I just knew that was wrong, because I had this habit. I would go through the church library and I would find these old books. It was like a church manual from 1923. It was sort of like a suggested book of order for Baptists. And it was, most of it was based on the New Hampshire Confession, that sort of thing. And I just knew that was wrong. And that shook. I remember clutching the pew in front of me and shaking. But I didn't do any violence. So
Yeah.
not all Baptist.
Sure.
But I called him the disaster pastor, and so he was. And but we have our disaster pastors, and in the PCA too.
Sure. Absolutely.
I fear. So, all right. Anything else before we move on? And again, we got two more of these. We'll play them.
Well,
people are enjoying them.
I did, just one last thing. You mentioned the RPW. I would say that in a lot of these bigger churches, a lot of that, that kind of language is not even common, because and I'm not saying it's an ignorance thing. It's just not part of the vernacular to talk about things like the regulative principle and to talk about those things, because it's just, we're going to do whatever it takes. We're going to do whatever's pragmatic. And, like you said, the agricultural stuff, that's very, very cool. It looks very chic. It looks very, it's very hip. And
it's farmhouse chic.
Yeah, exactly. I love what he said earlier. Brad said the white girl chapel. I'm going to use that too. All I'm here to do is collecting information for videos. I got to get a pipe though. I need a pipe. So if anybody out there wants to send me a pipe, I'll give you my address.
Come see me, Keith. I'll bring it to lunch. Let's go.
If you're a powerful social media influencer, you have to steal content constantly. That's just it's the sincerest form of flattery. This content theft. All right, let's see another one. We don't know what this is, but here we go.
Coming to another interdenominational meeting. October 31st is on the way, and I know Halloween can be quite controversial for some of us, so I just wanted to see what everyone has planned. We don't celebrate Halloween. What we celebrate, we have what's called a fall festival. The kids come to the church, they dress up in costumes, and we hand out candy. No Halloween, fall festival. That sounds just like Halloween to me. Ours is totally different. We have something called a trunk or treat, where the kids go around and they get candy out of people's cars. Yeah, instead of going to their homes, totally different. Guys, check it out. We're going to have a fully immersive escape room style judgment house where people are going to come in and get a chance to watch a reenactment of people dying and going to hell. It's going to be absolutely horrific, and we're even going to have a real live guillotine right there on the spot. My goodness, is all that really necessary? Hey man, if you love Jesus, you got to have a fully functioning guillotine. On October 31st, we're going to do what we do every year. Celebrate Reformation Day. I think celebrating the Reformation is bad. That's just the thing. On October 31st, 1517, we quit caring what you think. Don't forget the pumpkin patch.
All right, there's the Methodist. All right, you can probably figure out, you audio-only listeners, who most of those characters were. You'll have a mental image. You'll have to go back and go to Your Calvinist on Twitter, and you can watch any of these videos, and they're on YouTube as well. But that was Halloween. So we have Reformation Day. We did that this year, and the big win for Reformation Day was, of course, we had to have bratwurst and sausages and all those things, and we did it out in the middle of the field, and we had sort of a 2-week drought going, and someone mowed the field, and it was as dry. I mean, it was a tinderbox, and I was out there by myself with charcoal and gas grills, and I was convinced I was going to see the fire department, but it didn't happen. But I had people carrying buckets of water in case we set the whole place on fire. We would have been in the newspapers. That would have been cool. But yes, so that is one benefit of being Presbyterian or Lutheran. You have Reformation Day, and you pretend it's not practically the same thing as Halloween.
Sure. And this one got a lot of attention for the Presbyterian because of when he said on October 31st, 1517, we quit caring what you think. That was the Presbyterian who said that. And I can't even remember how many people messaged me and said that was their absolute favorite part of any of these videos, was looking at the Roman Catholic and saying on October 31st, 1517, we quit caring what you think. And they just said that made a lot of people happy. So.
Yeah, but that was, historically inaccurate because, Calvin was, he was only 8 years old then.
Oh, sure. No.
So there weren't any real Presbyterians then.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just kidding.
Again, representing the Reformed, if you will.
Yeah, I think you have the Reformed haughtiness down pretty well.
That I do.
Stephen, you think, of course, Stephen, as you sit there in your Southern gentleman garb and with a puff in your pipe, I guess you agree.
wholeheartedly with whatever heart I have left. So yes.
Yes, your alleged heart. All right.
Yeah,
So
I've had a lot of people
Two
tell
sizes too small.
me. Yeah. I've had a lot of people tell me because of the videos, they're like, well, you're on your way to Presbyterianism because you keep saying it's superior theology. I said, yeah. I said, I do believe that there is, obviously, I believe Reformed theology as a whole is superior theology. I don't agree with everything Presbyterians believe, but I do see us all in a united camp in regard to much of what we teach, and so men like R.C. Sproul, who was willing to have guys like Bodie Bacham and others who taught beside him, even John MacArthur. That's an encouragement to me, because I think we're all holding hands in one sense. We're all preaching the gospel. So,
well, when people go to Rome, they swim the Tiber. When they go Anglican, they swim the Thames. What happens when people go Presbyterian? What body of water do they swim?
Lake Geneva?
That's the question. Lake Geneva. Yeah, there we go. Is there a Lake Geneva? I don't know that, but it's official. That's what they swim now.
I think they probably just go to Total Wine, and that's probably the liquid metaphor. But
Lake Geneva's in Wisconsin. That's the best part of the joke.
yeah. Well, there's no. So it's Lake. That's not the name of the. I've been to Geneva. It was on a train journey, and what is the name of that lake? You're along it for hours. It's got two names. Well, later, and I think
Lake Superior.
yes,
Lake Superior.
there it is.
Is it not the case that the river near Canterbury is not the Thames? Is it the Wye or the something else? So I think swimming the Thames is not exactly right. But anyway,
You're the Anglophile, Brad.
I know it. We're in the weeds. It's okay. So this last one, I don't remember the name of it.
It is Lake Geneva in Switzerland, by the way.
Okay, all right.
English.
But they also call it Lake. Oh, there's another.
Le Mans.
That's it. Yeah, Lake Le Mans. So the last video we're going to play, I will say that your wardrobe department was not quite so inspired. You have a gold polo shirt, and for one character, you're just in the gold polo shirt, and then you're in the gold polo shirt with a blazer or sport coat and a weird hat. Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, this was actually this is a different set of videos, because this is not an interdenominational video. This is arguing with a Calvinist.
Okay.
I have a series called Arguing with a Calvinist, and this is me literally answering debate questions that have been posed to me regarding Calvinism. So none of this is, because I've been told these are straw men. This is real questions that I've been answered and real responses that I've been given. So this is just my humorous approach to showing what a real response to Calvinistic arguments is.
Allegedly. Okay, here we go.
And you have an argument against Calvinism. Yes, I do. If you believe in predestination, why should anyone ever evangelize? If God's already chosen who he's going to choose, then what's evangelism even for? Okay, yes, we do believe in predestination, but we believe that God uses means to accomplish his ends. Gospel proclamation is the means by which God saves his elect. So evangelism is necessary. Well, in my experience, Calvinism kills evangelism. Well, regardless of your experience, history actually shows us that that's not true. Some of the most powerful evangelists in history have been Calvinistic in their soteriology. George Whitefield was known for preaching the gospel to thousands of people at a time, and he was a Calvinist. There's also been a revival of street preaching in our day, and a lot of those guys out on the street, they're Calvinists. I don't think you should preach on the street. That's just going to turn people off to the gospel. So you're actually saying we shouldn't go out on the street and preach the gospel? Listen, what we should do is just live our lives in such a way that people see Christ in us. So it's the Calvinists who are killing evangelism then?
All right. So, we've used the word Calvinism more tonight on this show than we ever have. We sort of decided when we started the show that there were enough 5-point Calvinist, cage stage bros out there, but you're not one of those, So we sort of avoided that. But there you go. That's so you've in your circles you still deal with people like this, and you
absolutely.
sort of had an Australian accent there, so maybe that was Brian Houston.
Well, it was my attempt at Ray Comfort. Even though I love Ray Comfort, that was my New Zealand accent, and it was awful. And I pride myself on terrible accents. I tried a German accent one time, and it came off as Yiddish. So I know what I'm about, and I'm about bad accents.
Yeah, I think I saw that one, and I chose not to download it.
Yeah,
I think I saw that one. Yeah, that's okay.
So,
I had your best interest in mind.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I will say this though. Can I just tell a quick story about why I go by Calvinist? Why I use that term?
Please.
Okay, because I know a lot of people are sort of think it's a bad idea. And again, my show is called Conversations with a Calvinist. My website is calvinistpodcast.com. Shameless plug there. When I was first, when Calvinistic Reformed teaching was first being introduced at our church, there was a man who was very opposed to it, and he had gone to another local pastor who was very well known in our area, and that pastor told him if I was a Calvinist, he should try to get me fired, because I was teaching heresy. Well, it wasn't too long after that. I knew about that conversation because he told me about it. It wasn't too long after that, I walked into a restaurant that this particular pastor frequents. And when I walked into the restaurant, he looked up at me and turned to his person sitting next to him, and he said, "That guy's a Calvinist." And he said it loud enough that I could hear him, but he didn't know he said it loud enough that I could hear him. And when he turned and saw that I heard him, he ducked his head real quick, kind of covered his face and sort of looked away. And I just looked and smiled. I said, "Well, I guess I'm the Calvinist." So that sort of became just like the title. And so now I sign the way I begin my show is, "Thank you for listening to Conversation with a Calvinist. My name is Keith Foskey, and I'm a Calvinist." So it just sort of, some people run from it and some people steer into the embankment. And I'm the guy who's going off the cliff with fire in my hair,
All right. Well, as we sort of wrap up, I want to share the thing that some of our geeky listeners would probably enjoy the most, and that's your just incredible sermon outlines, what you preach from.
Yes, sir.
And it looks like a early 2000s training manual, but it's color coded. It's got a flow chart, and you've got your Greek interlinear there, ESV. So you're a real real Calvinist. Sorry. See, we don't say Calvinist much, so I called you a calendar, and no offense intended. But I've seen a few pastors, post their notes or how they do it. I tend to, in my rare 6 or 8 times a year, teaching on Wednesday night or teaching at the prison, I pretty much write my stuff out. Because if you don't do it a lot, it's very hard to gauge length and control the content without knowing exactly how long it's going to take. But I guess I'll bet Spinnenweber is impressed that you can get 50 minutes out of notes that are in that format. So tell us about that, because I really think a lot of our geeky listeners will like this part a lot if they're watching. So, this is not very good for audio, but tell us why and how you do this.
Well, first, Spin wanted to say something. Spin, what were you going to say?
What I really appreciate about you, Keith, is that you could have kept going exclusively with the laughs. But what I've appreciated on your Twitter lately is that you are including excerpts of sermons, and you're also publishing your outlines. And I just want to say, as a preacher, I like looking at these, and I also appreciate the fact that you are using your humor unto a good end, that it's not an end in itself, but you're putting the gospel out there, you're acquainting people with faithful preaching, and demonstrating, I think, that Reformed and Calvinistic preachers take the word seriously, because whether it's the color coding, you must go through a lot of color ink, or just it's very clear.
Hey, the church
you
pays
take
for
God-
it. It's all good. The church pays for that ink.
Yeah. It's just very clear that you take God's word seriously. And so even if we don't line up on every single thing, I know that you're preaching God's word to people, and that's a tremendous encouragement to me. And so I'm thankful that you have interspersed with the humor serious content and just demonstrating that preachers, we should strive to be laborers, worth their hire, that we should take this all seriously. So I sincerely appreciate you posting this stuff, and I'd encourage you to keep doing it.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you recognizing that, because the whole idea of starting the TikTok, somebody said or Jesse Pickett, who is a mutual friend of ours, he said, you're a he used the phrase TikTok star, and I said, I never in my life wanted on my resume to say TikTok star. That was never the intention. But if I am able to use humor as an avenue to share the gospel, then that is to me a valuable use of that tool. And I do have in my TikTok page several places where the gospel is proclaimed clearly and I would say accurately, in a way that hopefully people who've never heard the gospel. I have a young man in my church who came to faith through somebody on social media who was proclaiming the gospel. He had never been in a church before. He called me and he said, I've never been in a church before. I got saved a couple of months ago, and I want to go to church now. And I don't even know what that is like, because his parents are Jewish. He said, I've never ever stepped foot in a church, and now he is in a church. And that to me, it wasn't my videos that got him, but somebody else's videos. So that showed that this is a tool. Some guys go out on the street and preach, and we do open air preaching. We believe in it, but this is another avenue for reaching a people that may not be reached any other way, and it's a mission field. And so I appreciate you, Spin, recognizing that and saying that. Now, as far as what you see here, what you see is what my wife says is a very strange way of looking at things. I have a very odd way of visualizing words and visualizing ideas. And so when I am studying a text, I start with a blank piece of paper. I write the text out. If I can do it in the original language, which I'm limited in my training, but I do my best. If I can write it out in the original language, I will, and I'll bring the English in, and I will map the sentences out, sort of the old, what's it called? Sentence diagramming, putting them all together. And then I take a colored markers and I highlight connections between, pronouns and their antecedents, and connections between verbs and who's doing the action and what kind of action's being done, and whether or not it's a past tense, aorist tense or whatever. I write those things out. And so when I'm finished, it looks like a madman has done one of those, spread out conspiracy theory maps. It looks like a map.
A beautiful mind.
Yeah.
You are
okay.
a Baptist beautiful mind.
Well, I'll take it. I'll take that. But so the thing on the right is, what I do is I take that drawing that I do, and I go back and I make those connections, and I put it into a Pages file, because I use Mac. I put it into a Pages file, and I just create text boxes, and I color code like this past week was Colossians 1:24-29. And the focus that I was focusing on, I don't know if you can see this, but it's the sufferings that Paul talks about at the beginning. Is I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake. And then at the end, he says, for this I toil, struggling with all his energy and his power. And I show that there's a line of thought, because Paul is talking about his ministry, and it begins and ends with the book ending of suffering and struggling, and you'll see a red connection there. And what's in the center is Christ in you. What gets us through struggling? What gets us through suffering? What allows us to toil? It's his energy in us. It's him. It's the indwelling presence of the Spirit that allows us to struggle and succeed in ministry. And without that, we will not. And so that was the sermon in 5 minutes, but that's what I get out of what's on the right. Now, what's on the left is really a series of cross references, and that's what's connected there. It's so that when I'm walking through the text, if I want to make cross references, or if I have a quote or a specific commentary that I'm quoting, that's what's in the boxes on the left.
All right. Well, I would encourage you to post some of these, and we also have a fine PCA pastor, John Payne, who's also the head of the Gospel Reformation Network. He's got sort of an artist lady in his church, and she does this she takes notes artistically with all sketches and what looks like professional fonts, though she's done it by hand. Those are fascinating. He occasionally posts those, and you would enjoy seeing that. But yeah, this is the geeky sort of thing that some Presbycast listeners are just going to love, so they can follow you on Twitter at Your Calvinist, and this might be your incentive to post a few more.
Sure.
But I was thinking while you were talking, you were big on TikTok. It could be because you wore more clothes than anyone ever has on TikTok. Have you ever thought about that?
Well, I think everyone in the world thanks God that I wear more clothes on TikTok, because they don't want me with anything else, I promise.
Okay, well, we salute you for wearing plenty of clothes. That's very good. Yeah. So as we wrap up, and we've gone longer than this is not long for us, but wish we'd have got to this topic earlier. The place of humor, and of course, Stephen mentioned that there's a good way, and that it's not just humor, but there is humor. You've done a little thinking about this. Tell us what you've thought about the role and place of humor in maybe in preaching or in teaching or in the Christian life or on social media.
Well, one passage that sticks out to me is when the scripture says, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine." And I do think that sometimes in our most difficult hours, things that bring a little bit of levity into our lives can be a positive. And one part of my ministry that very few people know about is I grew up working in a funeral home, and I have done over 150 funerals in my time as a minister for families that I never met before doing the funeral. I work with Corey Curlin Funeral Home, which is a local funeral home, and I do services for them about once a month, and I've done that for 15 years. So I spend a lot of time with people who are grieving, and a well-timed word of encouragement, sometimes a humorous word, can be and I'm not saying you make jokes at funerals, please understand. What I'm saying is sometimes...
That's what you said. We heard you say it.
Sometimes...
Putting the fun back in funeral.
Thank you. That was actually something. When you grow up in the funeral business, like I said, I worked as a funeral attendant while I was in high school. Everybody else went to work at McDonald's and stuff, but I wore a suit to work every time I went to work, and I wore a suit, went to the funeral home, and I worked with families who were grieving. And I just found that there are times that encouraging and humorous time, and I saw this in men who were speaking at funerals. People want to hear a funny story about grandma. People want to hear something that makes them smile in their time of grief, and give them an opportunity to do that. So that's one place that I think humor is often is like a balm. It does good like a medicine. The other thing you mentioned earlier about coarse jesting, I would hope that no one would ever consider what I do to be coarse or to be offensive in the sense of using language that is, I
really think coarse jesting has to do with, cruelly, and often, I think I've even read somewhere that maybe, it's sexual joking between the same sex, just sort of really being, really persecuting someone. There may be more to it than that, but it's not a funny word.
Sure. And I think, some of the Methodists that on TikTok, especially who have come, one guy said, "I'm tired of you." What did he say? He didn't say insulting. He said, slamming, or I forget the word he used, but basically that I was trying to hurt them. I said, no, I'm pointing out the reality of what's going on in your denomination, and you have to realize this is true. And like you said, Brad, it's not just them. It's in all of the mainline churches. It's whether it's the Episcopals, whether it's the PCUSA, whether it's whatever it is. And
the mainline Lutherans are really, if you get right down to it, Spin's probably seen enough to see this. the evangelical Lutheran Church, they are about as wacky as anyone. So yeah.
Yeah,
And they're good people in all those churches. We can't understand it. They're refugees, they're stranded, they're castaways, they don't know what to do. But that's one of the reasons we care about doctrine and church order.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that humor is a good tool. Again, the vast majority of people are very positive about what I do, and I forget which one of you said it, but this is the truth. I say it with a twinkle in my eye. There's a sense in which I hope that everybody understands it's a joke, and I want you to know I'm teasing you guys too. I'm teasing the Presbyterians with the bow tie and the superior theology. I know that there are Reform guys who really hold themselves as haughty, but I know that the vast majority of you guys are humble, godly men. Except for Spin. I'm just kidding.
Guilty.
but seriously, it's all in good fun, and I think we should be able to rib one another in the sense of brotherly, just like a brother who loves a brother can give him a little bit of a elbow, well, hey, this is the way you behave, and it's really not. It's all hyperbolic. It's all exaggerative and caricature. Except for Big Eva, they're just like that.
Oh yeah, and they're fair game too, because they're just this mercantile, pragmatic self-parody. So you don't even have to try to parody the Big Eva.
No, I just read Christianity Today, and that's where I get my stuff.
They're very good. Absolutely. No, if you meet Spinnenweber during the week, he dresses sort of like Eminem, so it's not really. He's this is very situational where you've
till
caught
I
him
collapse,
tonight.
I will continue to dress that way. And
The backwards
in all seriousness,
baseball caps. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Keith, what I like about the humor is that it's very humanizing. People don't laugh anymore because I think they're so afraid of stepping on toes or offending, and so there's something nice about somebody who can kind of cut it up just a little bit and do so in, I would say, not in a vulgar or in sort of that coarse joking way, but just sort of with the ribbing or just the twinkle in the eye. Isn't there something of an evangelistic appeal there? I would say too that Christians can laugh. That Christians can laugh when everybody else is so stern. I mean, they're hunkering down, they're afraid. We're not anxious. We're laughing. We're not afraid because we know that Christ wins and we win with him. So I appreciate how your humor is not personality driven and saying, okay, everybody pay attention to Keith Foskey, but it's, I'm taking you somewhere. And so, dare I say it, your humor is missional.
I love it. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. It, like you said, it's got a purpose, and I'm thankful that you're saying that because it makes me feel like somebody heard the message. Yeah.
Yeah, there's such a thing as being too earnest. And, one of my favorite verses, and, forgive me for forgetting the chapter and verse, could be 9, Proverbs, and it's much better than the King James. Spinnenweber will remember it. Be ye not righteous overmuch. Don't be too righteous. And that, I think that means sort of, self-consciously, performatively, self-consciously righteous or trying to appear that way. But I've always thought that the commandment to not be overly righteous. I think I nail that one. If keeping that particular command is good, I'm good. So Spinnenweber, I think you've thought about that before.
Yeah, we're actually funny you mentioned we are preaching through Ecclesiastes, and shout out to my buddy Ethan
So
McConnell.
is that Proverbs or
I think it's
Ecclesiastes?
Ecclesiastes. Be
Okay,
not
I probably
overly
blew it.
righteous.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry.
You interviewed Ben Shaw on this, and his commentary has been a very helpful companion to me. But we're preaching through Ecclesiastes in the evenings, and my newly minted associate pastor Ethan McConnell, who just got ordained this past Sunday. There are a few things on this side of heaven more glorious than a Presbyterian ordination service. But we're preaching through Ecclesiastes, and as Presbyterians, we don't want to be scolds. We don't want to be scolds, and a furrowed brow, I would not say, is a badge of sanctification. I think we have to laugh. I think that it's proof positive that we're resting in the sovereignty of God, that we don't feel the need to constantly be in control, but we can cut it up and have. So without your videos, Keith, I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't know. So there's an ecumenism, I think a healthy ecumenism that's even developed by way of humor. So, and that's frankly, 2020 happened and I got ordained in 2019. 2019, everything was serious when 2020 happened. Fresh out of seminary, if I catch a cold or if I think I have COVID, I might kill somebody. But that's right when I found Presbycast.
Yeah, you weren't really all that fresh, though, as I recall.
Fresh like a newborn. So, like boy preacher. But I was listening to Presbycast in the garage, and I was laughing. Yeah. And that levity was a godsend. I don't know if I've ever told you that, Brad, but it was kind of in that moment where I felt the pressure and the weight of
was
the world
there a
on my
running
shoulder.
car? Was there a running car in the garage? I mean,
there was not. No, sir.
Okay.
My Ford Fiesta. So every day's a party. My Ford Fiesta was in the driveway. I was selling random stuff on eBay during that time. So
I can't tell you how great a joke that is. That is funny. Ford Fiesta every day's a party.
Every day's a party in my world.
Because we've talked about, my wife and I have talked about doing a show called "If the Denominations Were Cars," and that my
what
friend.
would no, okay. So if Presbyterians had a car, it would be Presbyru. It would be Presbyru.
Well, I was going to say it was BMW because it's superior theology meets superior automotive technology.
Yeah.
In Greenville, that's the case.
all of the caricatures of BMW drivers match caricatures of Presbyterians.
There you go. Yeah.
So I have a 2007 Subaru Forester, gray, as every 2007 Subaru Forester is silver gray. And the jokes about Subaru drivers. So I just leaned into it, and I ordered it from Europe. It's the European style custom plate, and it says Presbyru on the front.
Nice.
And I put it on the front. I thought it would be vandalized, but it hasn't been. So it's still there. It's lasted longer than I expected. But that's where we are. But I did. You probably haven't seen it. I should resurrect it. I did a thing where I did the different denominations in NAPARC, which are conservative reformed denominations, in jeans. So we had skinny jeans, cargo jeans, tactical jeans, jean shorts for the OPC, pleated jeans for sort of a square denomination. But yeah, that same spirit, and it's fun. People like that. People like that. I think as Christians and denominationalists even, we are curious about other churches, and if you're really good, you can kind of read a church just by looking at the building or the sign, or just very little information. Not infallibly, but you can do it. But it's always cool when somebody does a caricature or a meme or something, because I think Christians do really think about other Christians, and not always negatively. Sometimes it's just curiosity. We're trying to figure out ourselves, and we're trying to figure out everyone else. So we're glad that you came on, and we were able to figure out a little more about your world and why you do what you do. And maybe we'll do this again sometime. And do please steal any jokes or memes or terms that we have, because we probably stole ours.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for having me on and for your kind words, and for the listeners who've been keeping me doing this. As long as people are watching, as long as people are sharing, I'm going to keep making videos. And I'm thankful to have elders who support what I'm doing. They're they're great men who when I first started doing this, they actually allowed me to take a room in our church and make it into a podcast studio because they saw what could be valuable. And so, and I think that we continue to, by doing this, we're continuing to reach people. So thank you, gentlemen, for having me on. We appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you. And Resby, you know what you always do. And Spin and Weber, thank you for being with us. And Daning, I'm sure you had a cocktail party that you skipped. You're dressed for it. Probably were having some.
He's gonna head on down to the drones and speak with Gussie and Birdie a little bit later.
You probably were having some leather-bound volumes rebound, or you needed to oil some books or something.
I did. I put them all on my mahogany bookshelves, and to keep, in terms of stealing anything from Presbycast, I was taking a church history tour actually with Brad's senior pastor in Charleston, and we were in this African American, I think it's Methodist Episcopal, I can't remember what it is, an AME church. But the pastor there, as he was showing us around where John Girardeau used to pastor, he said, "You know what originality is? Forgetting where you heard it first." So had that.
Yep. He's already forgotten all of it. Okay. All right, Resby, we'll tell our fine listeners good night. Thank our guests, and you know what to do.
Fine listeners. Come on now. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Keith, for coming
so many times when I didn't have the time, I couldn't call nobody but
thank you
the
to
Lord.
all
You know he heard my plea, he loved to see about me.
please enjoy all the music. Now go off the air. And as you wait for our next episode, please don't be hurt.
I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord, and that's enough, that's enough, that's enough. Well, he raised me, and he saved me, he saw me, and he called me. He's my keeper, he's my guide, and I can feel him walking right by my side. I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord. And that's enough, that's enough, that's enough. Well, he raised me, and he saved me, oh, he taught me, and then he called me. He's my keeper, he's my guide, and I can feel him walking right by my side. I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord, I've got the Lord. And that's enough, that's enough, that's enough.
What's wrong with you people?